many thanks for the very kind introduction. My talk is really about some of the lessons that I've had to learn the hard way by having made the transition from academia to entrepreneurship. So about 4 years ago, I kind of left the known and trusted world of academia, and I moved into doing a startup of my own. And there were some really hard and tough lessons along the way, and I think I'm just going to summarize some of those lessons. And then I think, it was a great few talks before this, which actually sort of, it's almost like the wish list of some of the things that we should be doing. And it's great to see, people like Amit and Chris and Ravi all, sort of working on those very important problems, right? So just a very quick introduction to the company itself. IDA is a machine learning company. We really started off really purely as a machine learning team. But today, what we do is we deliver products to insurance. So, health and life insurance is our core focus. And we didn't kind of start with that on day one, but we evolved and stumbled our way into that space, and we are now there. Today, I'm really happy to say that after this long 4-year trek, in the course of last year, we've managed to start running multiple of our products live with a number of large health insurers in the region. So, every day, if somebody submits a health insurance claim, at some point of time, that claim will come to the IDA engine, and the IDA engine is actually now making decisions, right? So it's actually transforming the insurance sector. And just the last weekend, I think that was probably the icing on the cake for me, because I got a message from one of the head of claims for one of the large insurers in the region, and she wrote to me saying, thanks so much for developing the technology. It's really made a difference to the way we work. And I think that sort of really is the most satisfying thing that has been in this journey, right? To see that what you're building is being used and is making a difference to people at the end of the day. So, what are the products and services that we do offer? Really, as I said, we're very focused on life and health insurance. And our core product is a claims decision service, right? And that's what I'll mostly talk about today. So, when a health claim is submitted, what the engine tries to do is basically make a decision as to whether this claim should be approved, declined, etc. Might seem like a very simple problem, but it took us almost 3 years to get to where we've got to. We can also then do a fraud scoring, a risk scoring of a claim for being potentially unusual or an outlier in various ways, right? So it's a combination of both supervised and unsupervised machine learning. We also offer a range of other, components that sort of go into the entire house of what health and life insurance companies will want, which is an underwriting service, looking at the agent aspects of distribution and distribution channels, so looking at agent performance and misconduct, and some client engagement. Admittedly, that is the weaker part of our portfolio, so I'll talk about what is the strongest part, which is the claim service, right? But more than talking about that service, what I'm going to do is really talk about how we have gone from having machine learning as a research technology, something that people build models with, and then taking that and actually making it run live today for thousands of decisions that are being made daily, right? So how do we get something from a model to that? That's really what this talk is about. The journey for us has been that, right? Because we started off as people who can build models. Now how can we actually take those models and make them run at scale, making real world decisions for organizations, right? And from that, what I think are some of the open issues and challenges, which obviously I can see, colleagues like Amit and everybody else really making, huge contributions in that area. And those are really my wish list as well, because I can see those problems coming up again and again as we do this kind of work. I'll kind of just start off with my customary tribute to Mark Weiser. I mean, I think this really is what we should all aspire to when we build technology, right? I'm not saying that we have got there with machine learning or AI yet. I think it's a fair bit away, because it takes a lot of effort to get machine learning systems to work the way that they are seamlessly working, right? Forget about just daily living, even in an enterprise, to which is the context that I'm speaking about, enterprise, enterprise business integration, to get a machine learning system to work in the context of the existing business process and weave it so that it is working seamlessly is quite a challenge that we have discovered, and I think that is really the area that there will have to be a lot more work on, to look at how can these technologies be so much more easily integrated into the fabric of everyday working, everyday systems and processes and so on. So what am I going to talk about? So I'm going to talk about a few things. The good thing about having a few things is if I run out of time, can I ask somebody, Raja or somebody, just to wave to me when I have like 2 minutes left and I should stop, is I can easily just cut off and not talk about one or two things, right?
We'll post something in the chat. I think you'll
Sure.
see a chat message.
Okay, I'll see something on the chat. Okay, great. That's good. Um, so actually, how much time do I have? Another 15 minutes?
Yes, Shunari, yes.
15 minutes. Okay, so let me cover whatever I can, and then we just leave the rest. That's fine. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that when we are talking about integrating machine learning and making it work at scale in real world decisions, I think we need to look beyond a model, an algorithm, into a solution, right? And the solution may not all be machine learning. Basically, that's something that I've had to learn and teach myself, that you come there and you say, okay, we can build a model and that'll solve the problem. It may solve the problem to a certain extent, but they cannot really use it. It's like saying, I have an engine and now you need to drive this car. Actually, people want a car, which means they also want a seat, they want a steering wheel. You cannot sit on the engine, right? So that's, I think, the one of the big learnings for us, right? So a model is, you take data, you may take some data plus semantics in this particular case, you may build something, and then you can test it and make sure that this model is performing at a highly accurate and efficient manner. But then when people want to use it, they need more than the model. And that actually led to us rejigging the way we were offering our health claim solution. Because when we went into this space, we thought, okay, the big problem is we need to help people make the decision, right? But we found that the decision is only the brain. There's a lot of need for hands and legs as well. So the hands and legs is that today you'd be surprised to know across the ASEAN region, and this must be true in other parts of the world, as South Asia and so on. People, when they get a health claim, assessors actually read even today the entire document, and then they categorize with a calculator all the 600 or 200 line items that are there into categories, and they put this information into a system. Then they make a decision, right? So first of all, today there is nothing out there which will help people extract information. OCR is there, but OCR has its limits. Standard OCR techniques don't focus on the key things that you need to extract. So this is not very innovative. What we took is we work with any existing OCR technology, but we have customized it to extract all the relevant information that we want. Then when we come to the next part, which is the supervised machine learning part here, which is the decision making part, the key decisions that one has to make are that you need to accept a claim or decline it. If it is accepted, you need to know what is whether it's to be paid fully or partially. And if it's to be paid partially, then you must know what particular items are not to be paid, right? So that's basically a machine learning. There are 3 machine learning models which work here. But one of the biggest challenges which we had to overcome was that today, if you look at health insurance policies, if you have a pre-existing condition, or if you have some kind of risk, for instance, you might have asthma, then the assessor, when they issue your policy, will basically make a small note called an exclusion. And they will say that this person is excluded from respiratory illnesses, for instance. Now, when you go to the hospital, and we've heard all this, all the talks have mentioned ICD codes. So your invoice or statement from the hospital or clinic will actually mention either the code or the description, which is a medical term, as we all know. Now, somewhere we need to connect that bronchitis for which you were treated is actually a respiratory illness. And I think connecting this piece has been critical for us to kind of achieve the success that we have. And what we use is a deep learning model to extract that kind of information for us. So the deep learning model is one component in this overall supervised machine learning framework. The deep learning model gives us just one feature with respect to exclusions. I'm referring to it because, as I said, it's not one model, it's a model and multiple things that are sitting here. Then what we found was that this alone will not help also, because organizations are run by human beings and human beings only work with rules, and they just cannot engage with this kind of, oh, the machine will make a decision and now you'll be happy with it, right? So a lot of work that we had to do was to actually find that even if you have a 95% accurate MAD model, an AUC of 93 or 92 or whatever, very good performing model, when you go and present these to business users who do not understand this kind of technology, then what they come back and say is, but then that means it'll make 5% errors, is it? Right? So this doesn't help at all. And one of the big takeaways is, please do not ever discuss, machine learning metrics like, confusion matrices with anyone. I think they're called confusion matrix for a reason. They just confuse people. And I've sort of barred discussions on that because it doesn't help the purpose. So what we need to do and what we've learned to do is to find a boundary condition within which the performance of the model is super acceptable, right? So now to draw those boundary conditions, you might need to set some simple rules, some parameters, etc. So you actually supplement your machine learning model's decision with some gates and boundaries so that you actually, within that space, the machine learning's decisions are always acceptable, right? Then you can achieve automation. And this is really fundamental and key, I think, to basically set such, set such boundary conditions to enable automated decisioning to happen. So if the machine has very high confidence in its decision, so greater than 90%, and if it is, less than $5,000, and if it is not in this category of something, then such a decision can be automated. So this is now a set of business parameters to determine when the machine's decision is the final decision and when it needs to be thrown out for manual review. And I think that's a critical part of such systems. The final thing is we then built ourselves an outlier engine, we call it. We run this as our IDaaS fraud service. Basically, what this does is it's an unsupervised machine learning model. The methodology is something we developed in-house. The reason not being that there are not good, unsupervised outlier detection or anomaly detection methods. There are fantastic ones, but they lack the level of explainability which is needed in this kind of domain. So if I want to say that, okay, this claim is really unusual and somebody must look at it, then unless we say why it's unusual, it is totally unacceptable. And the problem with the very good algorithms like, isolation forests and so on, is that you'll get a good score, but it's very hard to justify the decision. The simpler ones like 3 sigma deviation is explainable because it's just away from the norm. But then there are some challenges because they're very simple. Then you end up with a lot of false positives as well. So we needed to find a balance. We developed something internally, and that's what we use, right? So I think what I'm trying to say is my first point was that, you need to think of a solution, not just a model. And this solution may have non-machine learning pieces. It may have rules. It may have a supervised engine, in this case, a deep learning model, and an unsupervised anomaly detection model. And all of this has come together in terms of what our product today is. And I think that's why we are really kind of able to get the kind of results that most people can't get in this domain at this point of time, right? So that's one of the key takeaways, okay, in terms of time. I'm going to come back to what I talked about, the area under the curve and metrics like that we like to talk about, precision, recall, all of these wonderful things that we know and love, which are really fantastic ways to internally validate whether your model is working or not. But I think if people want to take machine learning from where it is to something which people can use in enterprise at scale, we need to find ways of mapping machine learning metrics to really the business metrics that people are trying to solve. Okay, and I think that's something that we also have developed here. I'm just going to give you an example. These are actually real numbers. I'm very proud of them. So this is what we call our Smart Claims STP calculator. STP stands for straight through processing. And that's really one of the key parameters that businesses are interested in. How much automation can I achieve if I were to use this model? Now, if I were to use this model, if I can achieve this much automation, then what is the cost? Because the model is not going to be perfect. It's going to make some errors. So what is the cost of that error? And in this interface here, we actually give this to our clients. They can quantify the actual cost and the business value proposition very easily. So they can, it's a simulator. Having built a machine learning model, they can choose different parameters that they want to set. Like if they wanted to achieve automation and they say that they're going to automate claims which are less than $10,000, then what will we get, right? So in this case, they will be able to achieve an automation of 98 something percent, and that's reasonably accurate. But what will that cost? So in this case, then we quantify what is the cost in terms of false rejected and false approved. So then they might say that false rejected is really not acceptable from a business standpoint. What is false rejected? Machine learning model declines a claim which should be paid. So very simply, you can then remove that and say, I'm never going to automate this because that means somebody is going to be disadvantaged, right? So then I will not, automate. So then your STP rate will come down, but that's the business value proposition, right? That's what they need to do. So this is basically taking a machine learning model, and certainly there's some references to accuracy and so on, but then making it something which is more meaningful to people who want to use this kind of technology. And I think that's really critical in the transition of this technology from being technology and advanced AI to something that people can use, right? Okay, so let me then quickly go on to maybe the last point, and then I will not continue on in the interest of time. Explainable AI. So I've talk about this a lot because wherever you go, there are now people, even in the real world, who know AI and machine learning. And then they want to know, how does your algorithm make these decisions? And is it explainable? Is it a black box? So I think that one of the important things is to hold AI accountable to the same standards as we hold people accountable for, right? So when a credit officer in a bank who's assessing a loan application decides to give a loan, we only ask them, why did you give this loan or why did you reject this application? We don't really ask them which neuron in your brain fired that made you make this decision, do we? So I think that is really what we as an academic community really must focus on. It's really why the decision is made. Now, how the decision is made is the science behind it. We are interested in developing these technologies. But I think the critical thing that people need to know is when the model says this claim is to be declined, why does it say so? Right? So I am not sure that we actually have a full answer to this in all its glory, but I think all the talks today have kind of, I think that is the way forward to achieving any kind of explainability. I think Amit actually referred to that as well. Because if you think of it, when you learn only from data, what you have is correlations. You cannot ever get to any causality because the machine only sees that data and the correlations. It's only when you can give it some context, when you can give it some knowledge, then maybe causal explanations can emerge, right? In the interim, what we've done is basically come up with something simpler, which tries to understand the kind of key features that are important in this domain, and with the knowledge of the domain, be able to generate some explanations such as what you can see below. Diagnosis is related to the underwriting exclusion, or this is issued on a substandard term, something which is meaningful, but still gives people a sense of all the important things that they are looking for have been looked at. Right. So this is really not research at this point of time. It's just technology. But the point is that this is an area which I think is very critical. People want to, and to be able to do this, I think semantic technologies and domain knowledge and some kind of knowledge integrated with machine learning seems to be the best way forward. I have little doubt in saying that. I think that might be the best way forward. So now I'm not going to go through all of this. I'm going to stop with just the last slide. I'm going to skip all of that and just get to the last slide, where I think there are some serious areas where, research directions could really, really help in transforming. I think one of the biggest problems is imbalanced data. So real world problems, there's always imbalance. There are, lots of people who do everything right, and there's a small percentage of people who do fraud. And I think that area is where machine learning systems, classical machine learning systems, are quite weak. They will predict the major class very well. They will perform really badly. The recall is not very good on the minor class, and it's quite challenging to get over that. Learning from data plus knowledge is probably the key. Currently, all this knowledge is handcrafted features into machine learning, but the methodologies that we've seen today in this workshop are probably the key to the future in terms of, first of all, getting machines to learn better, but also to provide some explanations because they can see causal relationships. Unsupervised learning, definitely with explanations, is an area I believe there's huge potential to do a lot of work. And I think learning from a few labeled samples, I mean, this is something that people have been looking at, but learning well from few labeled samples is, I think, is something that these are the kind of technologies that could be very transformational. The last one is MLOps. A lot of interest right now, but I can tell you that as somebody who's deploying real world machine learning models, maintaining the models, having enough intelligence in the framework, not just in the model, so that the model itself can understand, or the system can understand when this model is working and not working, and can actually tell people that, hey, there's something wrong. It's not making the right decisions. I mean, this kind of introspection of the model from the system is, I think, a very important area. I'm going to stop now and not belabor the point. Happy to take questions. I might have overshot by a couple of minutes.